tiny bit. Right, good morning. How are you all? Nice to see you. You're all here, which is fantastic. I presume you're all here. You are all the same people. It's very bright lights. You could be a bunch of different... No, you are the same people. Although, to be honest, after the wine last night, I don't think anybody is the same person. What an absolutely amazing evening. I have to say, the virtual people, I mean, we wanted you to be there. We felt like you were there, but clearly you were in your own homes. We hope that the virtual people were drinking as much as we were last night in their own homes. And the virtual people I gather out there in virtual land, you've been lucky enough to have a nice little hoogie morning this morning with Eva and Maria, and you've been talking about all sorts of things about cooking and about the ability to have enough time in the kitchen and what have you. So very nice that you've already joined us. We're all here together. What a night last night. We had the 3 Js. We had Jakob, Jonas and Jeppe, and they just gave us the most amazing thing. We had muscles and we had music. What more could one ask for? I mean, if there was, I mean, you really are extremely lucky people, aren't you? But I know you've paid for it, so you expect a lot. Right. We had a fantastic conversation at breakfast this morning. We talked about just what a lovely day yesterday was and how nice it was last night. I think one of the most interesting things for me, certainly, is noticing that even though we tried to sort of tribalize you and put your own little, with your stickers and everything, there's such bleed over. There's such a sort of sense that even if you are working in your own little spaces, that this taste sort of broadens out and there's such a wonderful overlap. So I think by the end of today, hopefully you are just going to feel like one big happy family, all driven by this notion of taste. Okay, so, right. And then, of course, this afternoon, we're going to try and bring all of that together in a rather exciting process, which we will talk more about later. But I'm going to kick off now. I'm hoping, I've just told that we might have a few technical problems, so let's just hope that we've got our 2 guests lined up virtually. So, as we broaden out into the realm of culture, society, and lifestyle, it's helpful then. Sorry, somebody's talking in my ear. It's not that voice, by the way, that we all hear at night. It's helpful then that we have someone who's going to who's got a tremendous amount of hands-on experience to craft policies that impact on the way that we function as a country and as a people. Laura Have Hoffmann has worked in the Danish Ministry of Culture and currently inspires everyone from volunteers to policymakers to make the changes through the think tank Frej, working to make Denmark a much more sustainable country. Now, I'm going to shift the burden onto poor Laura's shoulders here by saying, Laura, I know that only one of your speakers is there, but you might as well come up on stage and you can do your bit. So can you please give a very big round of applause to Laura Have Hoffmann.
Thank you so much. I'll just correct. I worked in the Ministry of Climate and not Culture. Might be a bit... It could have been interesting with the culture as well, but I was with climate. I think we will just get Claude up on the screen if he's here, and then I will try to introduce what we're going to talk about, and then introduce our lovely participants when they are hopefully both there. Yesterday we talked about taste, we talked about pleasure. I tasted broccoli as I've never tried before. The raspberry, I couldn't eat the raspberry on my dessert the same way that I normally do because I had this intense experience with the raspberry. I've never tried that before. It was very unique for me. So we have talked a lot about taste buds, pleasure. But as some mentioned, maybe we haven't talked that much about the planet and why it's really important to eat for the planet. And that is because of climate change, at least from my perspective. Most of you know that climate change, they are here, they are real, they are man-made. It's getting even worse. We just had a new IPCC report stating that it's too late to achieve the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree goal. It's too late. We see people starving. Around 9 million people are suffering from hunger. It will get worse with climate change. Cristina can help explain that. We had the hottest July globally in 142 years. What was the record year before that? That was last year. We have existence of some nations that are threatened to even be here if the climate change will really happen as we think. We have climate refugees, and we have mass extinctions of species. So that is what we're talking about. Basically, it's a question about that we're over-consuming the natural resources on this globe. The 19th of July, we consumed all of the resources that the Earth can generate in 1 year. So on 7 months, we used all that we should use So we have 5 months left that we have to leave in debt. How do you do this? In my work in Tænketanken Frej, we focus on food, we focus on sustainability, both in consumption and production. We think that food is one of our biggest problems regarding climate and sustainability, but then it's also one of the places where we can have the best solutions. In Denmark, an average citizens have a climate footprint of around 11 to 70 tons CO2 equivalent each year, different measurements, and around 55% of this comes from what we eat and what we drink. So it's a huge footprint from this, but then it's also something that you can change. If you only do the thing that you change what you eat from the worst categories in a food category, for example, from beef to chicken, you can reduce around 30%. So it's also a possible massive impact to do here. And that is what we'll talk about today, and how we do this. Because eating is not just something you do for yourself and for the pleasure. It's a social thing, as Claude will help explain. And Cristina, hopefully, when she's on, she can also explain why we do it and why we have to think maybe not only on our plate and what tastes good for us, but also for the people starving, and give a perspective on what is really at stake here, so we can motivate this. But I was extremely positive yesterday to get this feeling. Okay, maybe I don't have to do all of this thing, and maybe it don't have to be a bad taste in my mouth when I don't eat in a sustainable way. I can do maybe both and do it in a better way. And I think that is a message that would help more people to achieve the same. And now we have her, and I'm so pleased to have both of you here. And we can also hear you, I assume. Can we test? Well. Then I'll just introduce you, and then we can maybe have the sound working. Cristina, who we just got in, she's a professor at the Environmental Science Program at College for Science and Engineering and Director of International Programs at the Center for Urban Resilience at Loyola Marymount University. She works at the interface between science and policy related to climate change, health, food, and sustainable development. She works both with university, WHO, FARO, UNEP, governments, and NGOs worldwide. Cristina will help explain why sustainability is important and what a sustainable diet looks like. And she will also help us understand what the consequences of climate change will be if we don't really overcome these struggles. And we're so lucky to have Claude with us today as well. He doesn't only focus on food as an individual thing, but as a social action. He's a sociologist and anthropologist and head of research emeritus at the French National Center for Research. A lot of you here have read his work, and I did as well, and really enjoyed it. He has a special experience in international cross-cultural comparative approaches, both qualitative and quantitatively. And I'm really looking forward to his perspective on commensality and tyranny of choice and the omnivore's dilemma. So please give a big welcome for them. They are not here today. They are in Spain and France, but we had a short chat this morning, and I think it's perfect that Corona helped us be a bit more comfortable with this, even though it's strange. And Claude, he was afraid he wouldn't look good enough on the screen, but I think he does, and Cristina as well. So it's very nice to have you here. Do we have the audio on? Is it okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
In this session, we'll start with a presentation, first from Cristina, that will take us really up in the helicopter and explain what is a sustainable diet and why do we have to eat that way. And then Claude will take us a bit in between where we was yesterday and Cristina's perspective, and talk about eating as the social norm and social dimensions. And I'm really looking forward to that. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion, if we have time, about what is a sustainable diet and how do we eat today. And then in the second half of the session, after the break and the soapbox dialogues, we'll talk about the solutions. And I know Cristina is really looking forward to this. She told me that if you don't talk about the solutions, people will get depressed. So that's quite important. But now I'll give the word for Cristina, and maybe we have some slides. I don't know. Do we have some slides? We don't at the moment.
Yes.
We don't at the maybe then, Claude, maybe we should start with your presentation if we think we'll have the slides coming up later. Have you sent the slides?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Have you sent them to Mikael?
Yes.
Okay. But maybe we should start. We have been on the individual level looking at the taste bud. Maybe we should go to Claude now and hear about eating as with the social dimensions, and then we can see if we can fix the slides meanwhile. So Claude.
Okay, so you want me to talk now?
Yes, I think we should. Then we can give Christina's slides a bit more time.
Okay, but I get an echo.
An echo? Can we do something about that?
Maybe I can turn off. I hear myself a few seconds delay.
Can you turn all?
Turn off the sound.
Yeah, but that might be bad as well. Then you can't hear us. But maybe during the presentation, that is what you should do. Else, some technical guys could maybe guide us.
Comfortable. All right, let me turn off the volume so I cannot hear anything you're saying. So you cannot cut me off. That's
that's smart
okay,
trick.
So I'd like to start, since in the discussion, we had a discussion. Laura, you mentioned that you were wondering what is the definition of a sustainable diet. And so I looked into my notes, and I found this suggestion by a distinguished colleague of ours, Tim Lang, the British sociologist who's been doing a lot of thinking about these things. And here's his definition: sustainable diets are those diets with low environmental impacts, which contribute to food and nutrition security and to healthy life for present and future generations. Sustainable diets are protective and respectful of biodiversity and ecosystems, culturally acceptable, accessible, economically fair and affordable, nutritionally adequate, safe and healthy, while optimizing natural and human resources. Okay, it's pretty complete, but I'd like to make one really strong comment about this. They have to be culturally acceptable. So they are perfect on every other aspect, but apparently one should be satisfied with a diet that would be just culturally acceptable. I don't think that's enough. And I certainly do think that what it shows is that there's, in this definition, there's a preeminence of concerns over what is produced and how it is produced over the end consumer, or as I like to say, eater, because I don't think food is an ordinary form of consumption. It's different. We're not consumers, we're eaters. Because if we look at food as consumption, then we have to accept that it's the only form of consumption that actually enters the body of the consumer and becomes not just its fuel, his fuel or her fuel, but also actually literally part of the person consuming the food. Okay, so we literally are what we eat, and that's one fundamental dimension of the food. And I don't think that just acceptable really does the job. There are stronger requirements, and what this shows, I think, is that there should be more interaction between people looking at production and people looking at consumption, or for what it matters, retail, distribution, even processing. What do we make of the food industry in the future? What do we make of the retail industry? What do we make of what already exists? I mean, we cannot. What do we do? What do we make of animal farming? Do we get? There's not much that is said about all this, and what is not discussed is the way we as eaters function, how we operate, what is going on in our minds and our bodies, and not just our bodies. And I'd just like to make 1 point, 2 points actually, that are absolutely fundamental. We're omnivores, and my good friend and collaborator for decades, Paul Rosen, just produced this wonderful analysis in the 70s about the omnivore's dilemma, which is a term that Michael Pollan reused more recently, recognizing Paul's contribution. And then I've been trying to build on this concept of the omnivore's paradox. We are omnivores, which means that basically we have a dual relationship to food, and in particular to things we do not know, which are novel. We need novelty because it turns out that we are unable, biologically speaking, to synthesize all the essential amino acids that we need, okay? So we have to have a basic minimal diversity in what we eat. So if we need diversity, it means we need to be able to innovate, to try novel things. But novel things are dangerous potentially. We don't know whether they're toxic or not. So we are at the same time neophilic and neophobic. We need variety, and we fear variety or different things. And as Paul used to put it, familiarity breeds content, but at the same time, familiarity breeds contempt. We're bored when it's too familiar, and we can stand it when it's too novel, and we are extremely diffident to novelty. So we have contradictory impulses. We're both conservative and innovative. And when we go to Portugal, that's the example I like to, there are dozens of those, you know, they eat bacalhau at every meal, or so they told us that they used to. And when you think it sounds a little bit monotonous, and they say, but don't worry, we have more than 365 recipes for that. Which means that basically we have these paradoxical injunctions. On the one hand, be careful, on the other hand, try novel things. And it makes for an animal which is basically anxious about food. There's this dimension is very important. Now, what I'm saying is that we've invented something as humans to bridge the gap, to solve the paradox or the dilemma, and that's called cuisine. Cuisine is basically more, in the way I use it, it's more than just ingredients and techniques. That's not what I'm talking about. It's interactions between ingredients and techniques and humans and groups and societies and cultures. A cuisine is actually a set of rules, norms, ways, traditions, you name it. And, which is most important, it's analogous to language in the sense that, you know, you can say that all humans speak, but they speak different languages. All humans eat, but they eat according to different cuisines. I say according rather than they eat different cuisines, because if you accept that cuisines involve sets of rules and norms, they also have a syntax. And we eat according to syntaxes. And when you make a mistake, when you speak, people can hear it, and they can laugh or they can be shocked. But when you speak, you don't think about all the rules and the grammar and everything. It's just something that comes out automatically. It goes the same with food to a certain extent. We eat according to rules that we don't even think we realize we have. You know? If a French person goes to Denmark and eats herring at breakfast, the French are shocked. herring at breakfast? I mean, you know, it's incredible. That's unbelievable. I mean, it doesn't go. I mean, or if you add, I don't know, if you add jam, strawberry jam to your omelette, it's considered something just, you know, it doesn't work that way. So those are little examples, but of course there are more serious examples. And the essential thing behind this is that people eating according to the same cuisines recognize themselves as being part of the same group, the same identity, and they're more comfortable with their self and their body and everything, as is shown by the fact that a universal dimension of the human relationship to food, that's another one, is we are what we eat. There is this bias in the sense of cognitive psychology that we function as if we were literally becoming what we eat. If you eat, there are scores of beliefs in that area in traditional societies or in advertising in modern contemporary societies. There are these beliefs, I don't know, take this New Guinea group that has been described by an anthropologist as thinking that if a woman, for instance, if you want teenagers to grow up rapidly, you have to have them eat plants that grow rapidly. There's an analogy between what you eat and what happens to the person. Now, look at our advertising about food. A lot of these advertisings are based on exactly that same magical perception that if you drink such and such mineral water that we have in France that comes from the Alps, what you are drinking is the purity of the glaciers or the altitude of the mountains or the elevation or whatever you have. All these things, they are not just imaginary, they are real in the sense that they produce real results in human societies and cultures. And that makes it absolutely indispensable for us trying to understand food habits, trying to change food habits. It makes it necessary to understand them and how they function. And I would like to close this very general introduction. I'm sorry that I'm doing this huge thing in so little time. It's not very prudent, but I'd like to show that when we eat according to much more than just our individual taste buds and preferences and physiology and everything. We eat differently in the presence of others. We eat according to what others expect us to do. And there's a lot to discuss about what's happening currently with the individualization and the increased autonomy in the developed world, in the urban context, the increased autonomy of individuals in the presence of those traditional collective rules. And we have to think about what would make people more comfortable anyway, than making them individually responsible for everything they put into their mouth. Now, we will probably discuss this further, but if I look in retrospect to what has been attempted at changing people's food habits, it's not a novel thing. It's been going on almost forever. I'm skipping religions. I'm skipping the emergence of medicine. But I mean, just going back 100 or 150 years ago, we can see that there have been increasing attempts, particularly in the United States, to change people's food habits and improve them according to novel knowledge in nutrition. For instance, at the time of Wilbur Atwater, the discoverer or the inventor of caloric intake, it's been tried for 120 years to change people's individual food habits, particularly in the United States. Okay, 120 years later, they have 35% obesity. So it's hardly a success. Why is it hardly a success? Because it wasn't understood that people were eating according to social, cultural rules and to personal individual representations, what they had in their minds, and that it was not just enough to tell people individually, you are responsible for what you eat and you should make such and such choice. It doesn't work that way, and we shouldn't repeat the same mistakes. So we have to develop interdisciplinary research in trying to understand how food habits are created, fixed, modulated, change, how they evolve. And we have to make decisions based on this knowledge rather than on implicit assumptions
And I think
that by
that's
definition can never be evaluated.
and that is a very good. I don't know if you can hear me now, but you stopped talking. But very interesting perspectives. What you say here in the end? Now I can hear myself. That is frustrating. We should touch more upon that in the next session. Also, you told me yesterday, I said, ooh, we should talk about solutions in the second part of the session. You said, ooh, I'm a scientist. I'm really good at asking the very interesting and difficult questions. Sometimes the answers are a bit more difficult, but you told me you would really think about some solutions, and it sounds like you're thinking about at least a way that we can find the solution. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. Now, Cristina, I think we have your slides up here now, so it's perfect that works. I think now you'll tell us a bit about what is, in your perspective, a sustainable diet, and what are the consequences in relation to climate change. But now I'll give you the word if we have the sound on from you.
Yes.
Perfect.
So thank you so much for the opportunity. It has been so inspiring to hear you, Claude. It's true that it was making more sense to go from the global to the more particular, but c'est la vie. So I would like to give a completely different picture, not so personal, no warm, just real. So naked. If you don't mind to pass my slides, I think that I cannot pass them, right?
Nope. So yes, they are. You can just say new slide, and then
Okay,
they will give you a new slide.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Should we
So basically, what I was going to focus and discuss is that in the next slide or map, there's a map where you can see that none of us, there's not even one country that is free of non-communicable diseases and risk factors for obesity. I don't know if you see the map, but if you see,
yes, I think we need to change to slide number 2, right?
Yes.
Can you?
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Very good. So this is what I was mentioning, that if we think that there are countries that, if we think that it's only the US, no. There is not even one country that is free for the nutrition problem. So we have obesity rates higher than that is manageable by any public health institution in one at the national level in all the countries in the world. Besides that, we have in other countries serious problems of undernutrition in all the and malnutrition in all its forms. And right now, with COVID, we have 900 million of people that are hungry every day. So this is where I it's like think, well, the taste maybe is not so important in this situation. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the point is that the main drivers for food insecurity and malnutrition are due, in part, they are due to economic aspects and conflict-affected countries and territories and economic shocks. But as IPCC lead author, I have seen that from 2015 to the present, we have, I don't know if you remember, all El Niño events. So El Niño events during these years, before COVID, were driving millions of people hungry. And we were seeing, for example, in 2019, which is the last year that we can contabilize as a direct impact from climate, independent of COVID, we could see 29 million of acutely food insecure people in 26 climate-affected countries. So that means acutely food insecure people is people that if you don't mobilize immediately humanitarian assistance, they will die. Okay. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is the situation now, how food insecurity is included in the national determined contributions in the UNF Framework Convention for Climate Change. And food security is at least 61% of the parties that have NDCs, they have included food insecurity. If we can go to the next slide, please. But the same issues and the same problems that are creating climate change, we can maybe address them through the food systems, like managing better food systems, shifting, not diets, but shifting the food systems to have healthier diets, right? So if we can go to the next slide, please. So there is a huge potential for food systems, for mitigation from the food systems. And if we were looking and thinking that food-related greenhouse emissions can account for half of all the emissions that are allowed by targets from keeping the global rise in temperature lower than 2 degrees centigrades by 2050. But if we don't react urgently, this could go and exceed the total permissible levels by 2070. I know that you may think that 2070 is very far away, but maybe you have to start to think in a different way. Think about future, think about everything that is related to intergenerational justice. This is the way of maybe to frame timelines in our current life. So it's complicated, but maybe that's a way to do it. If we could go to the next slide, please. So that was when suddenly, after a lot of work of many scientists, suddenly we have finally a calculation that we were asking people in public health. We were asking for many years how much meat we need to eat per day to be able to be strong, etc. So that's we don't have a response, a general response, because everybody is a different body. But and it's like your age changes, and your your physical status changes very much the amount of meat or not meat that you may have. But we got the recommendations of science-based of the Lancet Commission, which was optimizing first for health and then for the planet. So if we were optimizing for health, you maybe have been looking at the Lancet Commission, but I would recommend that you read the little papers that have been informing this from the point of view of health for many years. So there is a study that I like very much that was about girls that have been followed for many years, in which the studies show that cohort of girls, the groups that were eating more meat than the others, have more chances and risk of cancer in several phases of their life. So that cohort has been studied in depth, and that's what gives me really the data to understand what I will do with my daughter. I will give her a big steak because this is what we thought that it was, when we were little, they were thinking, oh, eating more meat is better. or I will be very cautious and I will be listening to the Eat Lancet Commission paper that recommends to have protein, like the level of protein that they recommend per day. If you see how little is the red one, it could be the equivalent to 4 mussels. So if we go to the next slide, please. Oh, this is, again, those are the 4 that I wanted to show you. However, there is a difference between just having these 4 mussels and having the rest of the diversity of diet. And this is what Claude was talking about. In many of our countries, we have the 4 mussels and 10,000 other vegetables, fruits, vegetables, and algae that complement these 4 mussels, right? In other places, they don't have that. So this is some food for thought. And if we go to the next slide, please. What is very worrisome, and here we have been trying to work, and we have been collaborating for many years with the Nordic Food Policy Council. That it's not there anymore, but but all the impacts and consequences of their work is tangible, and we still look at that. And if we look at the national determined contributions that the member states and countries have filled and signed for to meet the Paris Treaty, we can see that they take in consideration agriculture, food waste, animal feed, and even food insecurity and nutrition, but diets, it was never thought about that. And then the system, it's not so easy to bring them out from the blue. The system of accountability for inventories of greenhouse emissions is not ready for diets. It's ready for agriculture, but not for diets. So this is not the end. This is not a tragic moment. The cities are ready to do that. So maybe we cannot do it at the national level, but through urban solutions, there are many opportunities to bring this forward. So I will leave it here, and very very interested in knowing how we will put this in into all the perspectives that we are trying to address here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Cristina. So, okay, Cristina, I'll start by asking you. Yesterday it was mentioned that the Eat Lancet report doesn't even really mention taste, only once, I think. Why is that, and do you think that taste is important, or is it too late to talk about taste? Is it too privileged to sit here and discuss taste when people are starving?
Well, I think that that's a question that everybody has to ask to themselves and respond to themselves. I mean, now working with the World Food Program is very difficult to reply more. But let me tell you a nice story, okay? I remember the first time that I was eating with a professor, a Maasai professor, that is a very good friend of mine. We were eating together. So first, I was inviting him to eat my food. He did not like anything. I don't know if he was hungry or not, but he could not eat a green bean. He did not like the potatoes. He didn't like anything that was in my plate. And when I was invited to eat soup with blood, I have to pass. And usually I can't for courtesy. I have eaten many things in my life for courtesy, but I could not eat the soup with blood, right? So taste it matters. It's very important. It's not important when you are super hungry, like or dying from hunger, but when you are getting together for eating with people, taste is very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Claude, can I ask you, yesterday we talked about eating as the social norms and their syntaxes. around the meal. And then we talk about which, there's individualization, more people eat alone, but still the group that you eat together with, if you do eat, you have to respect them and share the food on the table. And then we discussed, well, the group you eat with, could we say now with globalization, that it's not only the people surrounding the table, but it's actually all the people on the earth, so the ones you had to put into consideration when you eat and what you eat, should be all of the people. Is it to stretch it, or? No. I think your microphone is not on, maybe.
Yes, the question goes to Claude?
Yes, it does, but the audio doesn't come
through. Yes, now I'm sorry, it's my fault. I was trying to. Okay, I must apologize to Cristina, although it's not at all my fault, but I could not hear her presentation at all, because at this point when I'm speaking, I hear my voice as an echo, very strong. Maybe they will fix this too. But it wasn't until you finished your presentation that they managed to fix the problem. And yes, the echo is gone now. Thank you so much, the text. Okay, so I'm really sorry I cannot comment on Christina's presentation, but I can comment and add on what she just said about the anecdote with the host that couldn't eat, the guest that couldn't eat anything. I think that, it's not just a matter of individual taste. That's the point. Let me try with this anecdote. A few years ago, we published an edited book called Selective Eating. Shall we eat together again in the future, or something like that, the subtitle. And my introduction started with the anecdote, the following anecdote that Lévi-Strauss, the great anthropologist, tells at the beginning of his book, whose English title I don't remember, but in French it's Triste Tropique. And he tells about his first encounter with the Nambiquara Indians, Amerindians in the Amazon. And they offer him their usual meal, which consists of lizard tails and eggs, a couple of large mygal spiders, and some fruits, similar things. I mean, it doesn't even cross the mind of the anthropologist that he could say anything about that he has a diet, or he's vegan, or he's allergic to mygal spiders or anything of the sort, because as he knows it, turning down any of the food that is offered, just totally ruins the relationship that could build. Why? Because hospitality is not a one-way thing. It's not just someone giving everything they have to the guest. It's the guest reciprocating by according his trust. So the novel situation we are in now, in the developed world in particular, where people constantly claim that they have particular preferences or tastes, etc., which used to be bad manners in the old days, is also something that is very significant about the relationship that we have developed about food, which is totally, or increasingly at any rate, individualized. And I mean, it's a conquest to a certain extent. I mean, increased freedom, autonomy, freedom of choice, and the overarching presence of the freedom of choice. We have to have maximal choice in life, and when it comes to food in particular, and we have to make decisions that have to be rational about what we put into our body, but we are also supposed to be free, etc., and so on. And it's what it boils down to. It makes a certain social situation problematic, and it makes individuals also, although it is a conquest, I agree with that. I mean, you cannot turn down increased freedom, but freedom comes with novel difficulties and novel problems. And the thing is that we have to change. Whose habits do we have to change if we want to, quote, save the planet? Our habits in the developed world. I mean, it's not about changing other people's indigenous, changing their habits, it's changing ours. And I think that is what we should consider, try to understand what's going on with us. Do we have to accept having fewer choices? Because that's basically what we're told. I mean, we should eat less meat, for instance. Okay, let's eat less meat. But what do we do about people who recently access meat?
And I think this is
that's an ethical problem too.
It is, and I think this is a very good place to, our time is up, but luckily we will meet again after the soapbox dialogues, and I think this is a very good place to leave it here, so we can discuss maybe the solutions, or at least what we need to look at to find the solutions in the next part of the session. And to all of you, soapbox dialogues now, and then if you have some very interesting questions for these two brilliant participants, then come and let me know, and then I will make sure that we have a bit of time for this on the next session. Thank you and see you later.
I can just share the stage with the tree.
Yeah.
Well done you for getting through that. That was amazing. Okay, folks, virtual lot, you are very privileged because you are going to have an interview with none other than Queen Bee herself, Susanna Hoyland Peterson, who is going to be talking to you virtual folks in a second. You guys, you know the score now, don't you? This is an old habit. You'll be going downstairs. There will be a soapbox dialogue. You will be in the very capable hands of Karen Vistoff, who happens to be not only just a member of Taste for Life's management, but also a professor in the field of learning, food knowledge, taste and well-being at the Danish Institute for Pedagogy and Education, the DPU, at Aarhus University. So go and enjoy. You need to be back here at 12 o'clock sharp, okay, right? Because that's when we get going. So make sure you're back here a few minutes to 12 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. And see you in a bit. Take care. We're live to you folks. We're live to the world, as it were. So I've just come back from a fantastic soapbox dialogue. Karen had way too many people talking to her. It's absolutely fantastic. We couldn't stop them, the number of hands that were going up. So that's great. And I gather that Susanna behaved herself impeccably during an interview that was virtually to the virtual crowds. So we're all now back 12 o'clock for the last half of the session from this morning. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Laura.
Thank you so much.
Round of applause. Go on, why not?
Thank you so much. And Claude as well. And I think maybe we have a bit of difficulties getting Cristina online again, but we will manage. I think it was a very nice first session. We got some new words, some new perspectives of this with Taste and Planet. And I was able to join the soapbox dialogue down here, and that was really respectful, but also energized dialogue, I would say, about Taste and Planet and what to do and how do we talk about change in context of capitalism. What about, is there something called moral and sustainable taste even? And children and people are afraid of things, this omnivore's dilemma, the change. There was a comment that you should, if you want to teach your kids two good things, then you should teach them not to love, don't show them a forest, because they will vanish. Don't teach them football, because that's what they can play in the refugee camps. Hopefully, will not end there, but there is some big things at stake. I just put out some small plates with, I didn't have that much seaweed at home, but for you, I have all of you, there is some mealworms. Some of them is seasoned with chili and lemon. Some of them is seasoned with salt and vinegar. Will you eat it? We don't know. There's also some seaweed. There's some called sukkertang and gracilaria. Normally, it's not the best to eat it when it's dried, but you can taste. It's very healthy. And that's also to discuss a bit with Claude's perspectives on both the omnivore's dilemma. This is new food. Will you eat it? It's very healthy. It's very sustainable. But we also have a syntax and a cusine. And in the Danish and more Scandinavian European cuisine, then this is not a part of it. Chickpeas, lentils, which is on some of the plates. Maybe it is. Maybe it's easier to get you to eat chicken instead of beef, or just use meat as a type of spice. But I don't know if we have Cristina on yet, or we'll wait and we'll see. We'll start up a bit on the discussion, Claude. I don't know if you heard my question before. We're talking about an individualized society, but also as eating as a social norm, and you're part of a group and you have to behave in these. What is the group that you eat with today and you have to be aware of? Is it the ones surrounding the table? Is it the ones in your family, your country? Or could you say that people should be respectful and eat in accordance to the whole world's population?
Well, first of all, I don't say what people should or shouldn't do. That's not my job as a social scientist, not at any rate, not the way I understand it. What I'm trying to do is to understand what makes people tick. And when it comes to what you brought up, that is the example of the seaweed. It's interesting that I don't see that much difficulty about that, just because it's easier to fit it into a culinary syntax than it would be for some other ingredients I might discuss later. Look at it this way: a cuisine is a way of bridging the gap of the omnivore's paradox. Because if you have the syntax and you want to introduce a novel food, what you can do is explain to people or make people understand what it stands for, what it is supposed to substitute. And if it has the necessary features, then it probably would work. I have an example in mind, which is a few decades ago, I think maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Some local little cooperative came up with a new technology to make wheat grain pre-cooked, used like a vegetable, you know, a side dish. Because people don't eat wheat, they eat processed wheat in the form of, for instance, bread, okay? But chicken eat wheat. That was the marketing problem they had in order to launch the product. So what did they do? The advertising agency came up with I thought, a rather smart idea. They just said, there are other things than pasta and rice in life. Meaning that instead of pasta and rice in your menus, you could use our stuff. So you make something novel, more familiar by introducing it in one open slot. It will fit in. Okay, now that's one function of a cuisine. Another function of a cuisine is provide the way to make another way to make novel things familiar. It's called a sauce. If you have a familiar sauce, which is really essential, customary to your food habits and to your cuisine, then you can present or cook the novel food with that particular sauce and make it more familiar. The example I gave of bacalhau in Portugal is the example that illustrates the fact that you can bring diversity within a set of familiar things, or you could bring diversity in a set of monotonous things, diversity and etc. and so on. So that's the function of cuisine. Now, the problem I see is that cuisines, we are witnessing in a way a demise of cuisines. That is, with individual taste leading the band, okay, and personal preferences, aversions, avoidances, etc., being increasingly acceptable. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just witnessing that, observing that. It's measurable. So with this evolution towards increased individual freedom of choice, these culinary syntactic functions are somewhat now dysfunctional, and people eat increasingly as a function exclusively or in priority of their preferences, and there's less influence from other people, okay? And so it's increased freedom, but it's also increased problems because people get more and more anxiety. There's not the regulation of the bridging of the paradoxes, the resolution of the paradox anymore. So we live in a world of increasing anxiety, even though we are in front of a problem that is more of abundance than of shortage in the developed world. So that's the paradox. People have never ever been as worried about their food as they are nowadays. I mean, they were in the old days, but they are in the other parts of the world because of fear of shortage. But it's not no such thing until recently in our societies. There's only a recent emerging concern about what's going to happen to the planet. And that's the new thing that is going to need to orient what we're going to do in the future in terms of how we relate to food. So what I see from what you say, and it's fascinating, and I'm so sorry I couldn't hear what was going on at this soapbox thing. Very strange name for a meeting about food. And I hope there was no eating of soap or anything. I'm really sorry I didn't hear, and I'm not present to hear all the fascinating discussions. But one thing strikes me, it's the moralizing of the issue. And when I look back in retrospect to the relationship of humans to food, it's always been moralized. It's fundamentally a moral issue. And basically any human social group organizes itself on the basis of collecting resources and sharing resources. And for a few decades, it seems to me that the sharing part has been forgotten. It wasn't about what and how we should eat with other people. That is, as a child in the 60s, I was taught that you cannot help yourself first, you cannot eat more than other people, you cannot eat faster than other people. You cannot say you don't like something because it would, if you're disgusted by something and you show your disgust, it's going to contaminate the group, and that was extremely impolite. So the rules that we were taught as part of the socializing problem, the socialization process, they were almost exclusively based on how you behaved in respect to other people. And then gradually it became more and more about me, myself, and I. And yesterday there was this fascinating exchange between the two speakers in the afternoon. One saying sharing is the important dimension, and the other saying we should more and more develop foods according to individual preferences. And that's, I think, is the essence of the debate now. What do we make of individual freedom of choice? Has choice played too much of a part in the way we related to food? Was that the influence from a particular ideology, from a particular country in particular, if you see what I mean? That is, more choice is better. Do we really need that much choice in our life? I mean, Barry Schwartz, the American psychologist, made the point that, we don't necessarily need to spend so much time and energy making choices on things that are trivial. And maybe we should be more concerned about detrivializing some of our food, because the problem, particularly in the United States, I'm sure you've recognized the country I was alluding to. It's striking that the problem comes not to the exaggerated importance attributed to food by a minority of foodies, but about the trivialization of food that is always available at a very low cost, anywhere, anytime, without any of the syntax, or much less of the syntax I was alluding to. And that food that means nothing, that has a low cost and is given no value, it's given almost no value. It's just a source of guilt and immediate satisfaction of gratification, instant gratification of a low variety. That is where the problem comes from. The nutritional problem, the health problem, everything, and the enjoyment problem probably
and Claude,
too.
can
Because
I
the
ask you?
guilt-riddance, the fact that people are guilt-ridden about food is terrible. But I mean,
Can I ask you something about this, Claude? Because I think this is very interesting. That we have a cognitive capacity as humans. We cannot be aware and take rational decisions every time we act in the supermarket, at a restaurant, at a cafe, when we're here, if there's cake, insects on the table. We are not aware all the time, and we cannot be expected to be that. There's information, Cristina showed a lot of information, all of that and even more is out on the internet. I have the capacity to read, and then I as an individual, I should just act according to that. But I can't because of cognitive capacity. And also your study shows that people spend less and less time actually cooking and also eating, except it's a bit better in France, of course. But in this context of cognitive capacity, less time eating and tasting and really looking at the taste buds, what can we do then? Can social norms...
Laura, don't hesitate cutting me, but because I tend to ramble a bit and talk too long, and since I have no response from your side of the audience or anything, it's very difficult to regulate oneself. So I apologize.
No, it's perfect.
So I mean, it's a very good question that you're raising. I think I'd like to make the point that this is an implicit. I talked about implicit assumptions. Implicit assumptions should be the enemy of any scientist, okay? I mean, science is about trying to get rid of error and illusion by setting up processes and protocols and of all kinds to protect oneself against error and illusion. An implicit assumption is a source, of course, of eternal error. So the implicit assumption that has been behind eating behavior was that everything we put in our mouth is the result of a personal, individual, conscious, rational decision. But that's not true, obviously. I mean, there are lots of things that we do in everyday life, including outside of food, that are not conscious, rational, etc. I never remember where I set my keys or my glasses. And when I catch a bus in the morning to go to work, I don't think about what I'm doing, I just do it. So there's a part of automated or automatic behavior in our behavior. And when it comes to food, there is what I tried to say, I tried to say too much in too little time, or I spent too much time or whatever. But basically what I tried to show is that there are things that are included in our mental equipment through education, experience, practice, familiarity, etc. And they resort to, they are about food and about how food is classified in our culture. What is food and what is non-food? And if, for instance, I am in a culture in which insects are not food, well, they may be nutritionally or biologically edible, but they are not necessarily going to be culturally food in our minds. And that obstacle is very difficult to overcome. Now, the comparison between, coming back to your initial question, seaweed and animal food is absolutely essential. Some time ago, Paul Rosen and I think, published a short paper on what is natural based on a survey in 6 countries, something like that, and people's definition of natural. So it turned out that there was a big difference between animal food and plant food. Plant food was more readily considered natural, And it was considered, it was associated with notions that were of a less dangerous nature than animal food. And if you look at taboos that have been listed and observed by anthropologists in a variety of culture, for instance, in a database that has been set up a long time ago on traditional cultures, you find that mostly all taboos are, or strongest taboos or strongest disgusts and avoidances were about animal food. You see, you do have occasions in life in certain cultures in which you're not supposed to eat such and such plant food. I remember a group in India in which carrots were supposed to be abortive. So pregnant women would avoid carrots, which was a problem, by the way, in terms of vitamin input, well, anyway. So, but the basic avoidances and taboos, particularly in monotheist religions, they're not about cabbage or about alfalfa sprouts. They're about meats, animal food. So there is something particular, something different that we have in relation to animal food. I used to say that meat in particular is, I'm not sure it works in English, the pun, but it's the most adored food and it's the most abhorred food. It's the food that brings up taboos and disgust and aversions, and it's the food that is considered most desirable in all hunting-gathering societies, and in a number which represent 99% of human evolution, right? So we have this very particular relationship to meat. When it comes to seaweed, I think we can more easily introduce them in our various syntaxes. And it's a good illustration of what thinking in terms of cuisines can help realize.
Thank you. I have so many questions. One of them, a personal question, but could be good and relevant for more people. I haven't been eating meat for 12 years. One of my friends just tried. I'm trying to change a bit, eat a bit more meat. Sometimes I'm not there yet, but I will use it as season, maybe in some years. But he asked me, why do you do this? And one of the primary reasons, it's moral, it's climate, it's all kind of things. But actually, it's also really just a handy thing for me to reduce my choices. So I don't have to eat. He was like, you should just take a stance each time you eat something. What do you eat? What do you want to eat? But this is reducing my options so much, and somehow it's liberating. And I think that's interesting, and you've been writing some work also that some people, these religious or almost like religious beliefs that helps structure our cuisines and limit that. I think that's quite interesting. My question, though, is I'm challenged when I go out and visit people. Not people now. It's quite normal in Denmark, and it's easier. But I went to Palestine, China, and Singapore. When I was there, I did eat the meat that they served because I wouldn't be rude and exactly according to what you talk about. But when I visit in my job farmers in faraway Jutland, we're here now. I'm from here, so I am allowed to say it. And I'm going to spend an evening with them and at a big event and workshops. I'm always considering if I should ask them for a vegetarian option, or if I should just eat what is available and then sort the meat out. And I discussed it with one of my dear colleagues. My opinion was, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to be trouble. I don't want to act not according to the rules with this. He said, yes, Laura, you should, as an individual, you are helping spark change. You are helping them to remember that there are people eating this, and maybe some other ones will eat some vegetarian nice things, and then they will be inspired. What would you say I and other people as individuals should do to try to change these social norms? How can we do that, or how should they change? Long question. I'm rambling as well.
Wonderful example. No, not at all. It's the heart of the matter, and it. We've been doing, as I think you know, we've been doing some comparative research for over 20 years between societies and cultures that are supposed to be very close to each other, very similar, like take the Western, so-called Western cultures, if there is such a thing. But then when you compare the US versus US, Britain, Nordic countries, Netherlands, on the one hand, and the Southern European countries on the other hand, you find that there are such basic differences, but they are extremely, they tell you a lot about what you just described, that is the relationship to other people in taking part in a meal around a particular selections or preferences or rules. All right, so let me tell you this, an anecdote that's always more telling. About 15 years ago, I think, we set up a big study between 6 countries, US and 5 European countries, 4 languages, and in each country we had one local colleague that was helping us organize first a round of focus groups, then the questionnaires, then testing the questions, everything. Okay. When we completed the first collection of data, we invited them all to Paris. And in order to thank them, I thought, you know, French way, but many other people would do the same. We have to set up a good dinner. Okay. So I go to a restaurant I know, a chef I know, he's excellent, and we discuss at length the menu. We are very careful. Fish rather than meat, lots of vegetables for people who really, you know. We organize the pairings of wine and food. We make some trials.
Sounds nice.
When the dinner at the time comes, everybody cleans up the plates. I mean, so, you know, as they say in America, squeaky clean, you know, it's so clean that they don't need washing them anymore, literally, which the cooks love, okay? So everybody's happy, and then my German colleague turns to me and says, you know, Claude, this was very nice, but you took a lot of chances. I said, a lot of chances? What? Yeah, it would have been easier for you to give us each a menu and let us choose from the menu. But I said, you don't understand. I want to make this a case of hospitality and thank you. So it's like, it has to be close to what would be if I was inviting you in my home. And in my home, it's not à la carte. You know, I set up the menu and I try my best to satisfy you, okay? And she says, yeah, but nevertheless, you know, it could have been offending and et cetera, et cetera. The Italian lady, who's very, she says, well, I don't agree at all. I think you don't understand anything. It's just like the other day, some American friends called me. I had invited them to dinner, and they called ahead of the dinner, and they said, you know, we're delighted to have dinner at your place, but you have to know that my wife doesn't eat this, and I have this kind of diet. And she was incensed and was so rude of them, so childish, so bratish. What kind of, you know, again, when you come to my place, you don't eat à la carte, you don't order, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then Paul Rosen was there and he said, well, you know, the American view says, you know, no, I can understand when people we're going to spend some time together and you have to make things comfortable and everything and easy, no conflict, no nothing. So arrange it. That they became all very excited about the issue. It was getting very heated. So I said, let's step back and think about this. You know, it's our job after all. So we organized a session the next morning, devoted only to discussing this. And what emerged after analyzing the data, etc., realized that all our data was clearly in that direction. The difference between, on the one hand, people coming from countries with a religious Protestant tradition and people coming from Catholic countries.
Okay.
You see, the difference when you analyzed it was this. People in France or in Italy, when they are at the table, it's like a communion. It's almost the Eucharist, you see. This is my blood, this is my flesh. If the food at the middle of the table is really the Eucharist symbolism, then you're not going to fuss about it. It's a communion. So you take part in the communion. Otherwise, if you're a vegetarian or if you don't eat this or that or gluten or allergic or anything, you sort of excommunicate yourself. You see? So that's the thing. It's so difficult to overcome. And your experience with people as a vegetarian, with people where you felt compelled to eat the meat, reminds me exactly of that lady who once told me, I'm a vegetarian, but I'm to eat at the people I don't know very well, and they're very proud of their menu. And what do I do? You know, do I tell the lady, I'm sorry, but I'm a vegetarian, I'm not going to eat your dish of boar meat, you know? And she said, I can't do that, because anyway, she's going to ask me, do you eat eggs? Or that sort of thing. Then what do? I can turn around my meat, cut it up into tiny little pieces, and do the anorexic strategy, you know, that hide it under the knife and fork.
And that doesn't help the planet. That doesn't help the planet. Not the planet, not the pleasure. No.
Absolutely. So what she did, she told me she ate it. She ate it because she wanted to be part of the group. She wanted not to offend people. And then there's on YouTube, I found a French guy who was telling his followers that he had decided to be a vegetarian and keep being a vegetarian, but never to say I am a vegetarian, because he said, I'm tired of being the pain in the neck at the restaurant who makes everything complicated. So that's the French situation. There's pressure over people, and they tried to give on it. And then there's the American view. It's not the communion, it's a Protestant view. Individuals, free and responsible, and they're going to meet. It happened to me a number of times in American universities. Let's have lunch over such and such topic. So you negotiate in the first place about what to eat and where. Is it Chinese? Or I don't eat this, or I don't eat that, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. So you decide, you negotiate, and you go to that place, and you spend 20 minutes eating and discussing the thing, and goodbye, thank you, it's over. And it's a negotiation over a contract. So on one hand, it's a communion, that's the Catholic side, and on the other hand, it's a contract. It's almost business.
And the time is red now, and I had so many things that I wanted to discuss with you. I wanted to discuss nudging as a strategy to change this.
But what happened to Cristina?
Christina's online connection, but I miss Cristina and her perspectives. Now, there was a question for her, but I don't know how we should have fit in one more. The time is already up. But my last question for you is now, Cristina helped make the Eat Lancet report, did that. I helped make the Danish dietary advice under the title, Do Something Good for Health and Climate. We reduced the recommended amount of meat to 350 grams a week. But from this, to change it into a cuisine, to make people eat it as a group, and that I don't have to come and say, I need to eat it according to this, and you have to commentate that. What can we do something? What should we do? And we need to keep it brief because we're already over time and it's big and red down here. But can we do some?
Is this a?
Yes, it is a question.
This a question to me?
Yeah.
All right.
Which actors can we do something to change it, to help, like put a speed on the culture and the cuisine, or should we just wait and see?
I mean, you remember Oscar Wilde's quote about cynics being people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Well, I think I can use that quote when it comes to food, because there are instances in which you feel that people think only about the price of food and the caloric content of food or whatever, and the instant gratification of food, and that's what I call the trivialization of food. Okay, knowing the price, having the immediate gratification, the supposedly widest choice, while in fact it's the opposite, and decreasing to almost nothing the value of the food. Okay, and the reason why I wanted to be part of this meeting was that I thought it was a way, it was helping increase the value of food, and thinking in terms of taste, enjoyment, pleasure, etc., has been not at all opposite to helping the planet, but increasing the value of food is, in fact, increasing the value of our contribution to what. So I don't think we should eat. Life is too short to eat things that are of poor quality. So talking about the quality of the food, the taste is contributing in the increasing the value of food, the value put in food. I mean, I remember my parents cringing.
Okay, Paul is standing out here now. We are already over time. I would love to hear that story.
Okay,
Luckily, you are with us again in the 4th session. That Paul will. Maybe we can we can hear the story about your parents there. I hope so. Thank you so much for being here. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
As an Englishman, I feel very bad stopping a Frenchman from speaking.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you very much, Claude. There's nothing a la carte about you at all. And I thank you very much, Laura, and also for Cristina, that we've lost you. I'm sure you're doing something lovely. But I want to give them a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of headlines. Okay, you're going to go for lunch in a sec, and hopefully those at home. So go and enjoy. Make sure at home you're eating something of value. Otherwise, you're going to upset Claude and all of us here. If during the innovation showcases, if you bring along your headphones, because there's a coffee one supposedly where coffee and headphones go very well together. So bring along your headphones. What you need to do for lunch is you need to be able to go down to the brew pub. And you need to follow the flowers. I've never used that sentence before. You need to follow the flowers because the flowers will lead you to your lunch. It will all make sense when you get there. Thank you very much. We will see you back at 2:30 sharp, where things all change. You won't recognize the room, but you will be back, and I'm looking very much forward to it. So make sure you're back here to, say, 2:25, 2:30, and we'll kick off there. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a bit. Cheers.